I'm Joshua Spodek. I'm the author of the best-selling Leadership Step by Step, the award-winning podcast. I'm the host of Leadership and the Environment, and the upcoming book, Initiative. In today's episode, Dov and I talk about leadership and the environment, how you leading can develop your leadership skills, your experiences and beliefs to help you become a better leader that people will want to follow, and you'll learn how acting on the environment makes your life more delicious. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, you need to up-level your leadership? Well, on this episode, we're going to talk about leadership and the environment. The conversation about climate change and the environment, is it relevant to you as a leader? Or is it just flavor of the day? Well, catch this episode and find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any of our past episodes on our Facebook page. Simply go to Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty. Just search it out on Facebook. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, remember, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, though. So please do me a favor. Go on over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations. Woo-hoo-hoo! Alrighty. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Tampa, Florida to Colorado Springs. If you're a regular listener, we want to thank you for helping us to become the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we also are found on Roku TV with over 100,000 subscribers and with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners. For every show, we're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as one of the #1 podcasts to make you a better leader. And you can also find us on Google Home or Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing this show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a C-suite leader, a CEO, a sales leader, or an entrepreneur, or leader in any capacity, you know that environmental issues are part of the everyday news cycle. But here's the question. Above and beyond either side of that discussion about the environment and how it is actually in many ways a political catapult, is it relevant to us as leaders of industry? And if it is, why is it relevant? Well, stay tuned because our guest today is about to take a deep dive into that controversial subject. Our guest on this episode is Joshua Spodek, PhD. He is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Leadership Step by Step. He's the host of the award-winning Leadership and the Environment podcast and has a TEDx Talk by the same name. He's a professor at NYU. He writes a column for Inc. and blogs daily on joshuaspodek.com. He holds 5 Ivy League degrees and studied under a Nobel laureate. He visited North Korea, not once, but twice. And he actually came back, and he's not dead, and he didn't come in a body bag. He swam across the Hudson River. We'll talk about that. And has done, would you believe, since 2011, over 130,000 burpees and counting, and is committed to being a leader. It takes about 16 months to produce a load of garbage. That's, your normal load of garbage that you take out. It takes him 16 months because he's about leadership in the environment. In an age of easy access, he's also not flown at all since March 2016. Please help me welcome the man that Esquire Genius issue called the best and the brightest. NBC said he's astrophysicist turned new media whiz kid and returning champion, my friend and yours, Joshua Spodek!
Dov, it's great to see you again. It's always great to see you. I was going to bring my B game, but now sitting here talking to you, I think I got to bring my A game.
You better head, mate. You better head or I'll kick your ass. That's good. I'm glad to have you here, mate. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And we should sort of let everybody know that you have been on the show before. That's why I said returning champion. I've been on your show a couple of times, and it's been great. And you and I have had some great conversations. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And it is a different conversation about leadership. So let's jump into sort of an odd part of it, which is, you talk about leadership, you talk about the environment. Did that happen because you swam across the Hudson, which is a pretty gross place to swim? And you went, Jesus, we got to do something about the environment if I'm going to swim in this stuff.
I can't say it was separate, but it was really a few other things. I mean, everyone knows it's front page of the news. People talk about they want to raise awareness. When something's front page of the news for a decade, everyone's aware. The question is not awareness. The question is action. What are we doing about it? And I was like most people. I was like, well, what can I do? And there are a few things that I started to do personally, just because leadership to me is much more, it is not the guy in the corner office telling people what to do. Mm-mm. It's living in an integrated life. Most leaders to me, their work and their life are not separate. And so everything you do has to be consistent with everything else that you do. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but then you're not going to be an integrated leader. Right. And so I said, am I going to live by my values or not? Like, one of the big things was I looked at my garbage and I saw how much garbage I produced. Mm-hmm. Now, you gave away what is now that it's once every 16 months it takes me to fill up a load. Right. At the time, it was once a week. And I looked down at my garbage and I thought, this is a lot. This is a lot of garbage. Most times I didn't think about it. And I thought, I'm going to do something about this. And then I thought, but what? Because it was mostly food packaging. Yeah. And what am I going to not eat? And, most people, they kind of stop there. And actually, because I thought I can do something, but also I don't know what to do, it made me feel helpless. It made me feel futility. It made me feel guilt. Because, people are going to have to deal with this plastic for hundreds of years. And I did what a lot of people do. Well, actually, I think some people, when you get feelings of guilt or shame or, feelings you don't like, some people withdraw, some people feel depressed. I did what school taught me to do, which was I thought, I'm going to plan, I'm going to analyze, I'm going to figure out what to do. And all the planning and analysis pops up in my head. It makes my head very busy. And then that pushes out the feelings, those emotions I didn't like, because my mind's really busy. Once those emotions are gone, I go back to what I was doing before and problem solved. Except that the guilt comes up again sometime later. Right. And it's not really guilt. It's knowing that I'm hurting someone and that I could do something about it. I don't know what you call that. Inadequate, just feelings that I could do something, not living by my values. And 6 months later, after every time the emotions would come up, I'd push them out with the busy mind. Sure. And then one day I said, look, this planning and analysis it got me high grades in school, but it's not getting me anywhere in life. And I said, I'm going to do it right now. I'm just going to go for a week without buying any packaged food. Let's see if I could do it. And at first, part of the 6 months of sitting there not doing anything was like, what do I do on day one? What do I do on day two? What do I do on day three? Here's what works. Go to the store when you're hungry. I look at the shelf. There's a box. That's in a box. That's in a bag. That's in a jar. That's in a rubber band. That's got a sticker. And what's left? And it's fruits, vegetables. If I brought a bag with me, it would be, I'd get the dried beans and the nuts from the bulk section. And look, I knew how to cook growing up because we had to, it was part of the chores, but I didn't know how to cook from scratch. And I learned how to cook from scratch. Right. And this might not sound leadership related, but most of us eat. So I learned how to do something I didn't know how to do before. And what I was pleasantly surprised to find was that my food got more cheaper, more convenient, more social, because people would come over more. But the big thing was, it was what I want from food more than anything else is I want it to be delicious. So my food was more delicious than ever because I cooked what I wanted. And now this is the answer to your question. What happened in this process was that I associated acting on my environmental values with making my life more delicious, because that was the predominant thing. And so later, when I challenged myself to go without flying for a while, I felt this is probably going to improve my life. And I'd like to improve my life. If a little thing improved my life a little, maybe a big thing will improve my life a lot. And I'm not telling anyone else to try that.
No.
Try what I found works. And this is the core of my leadership practice. And it didn't hit me until I actually started doing it. But see, if I tell you, like the polar ice caps are melting and it's because of fossil fuels, does that really make you want to start carpooling? Does it make you really want to? If I say, I don't know,
well, the fact of the matter is, for any of us, nothing is real unless it affects us. I can clearly remember a Republican senator who was very anti-gay and gay marriage and all the rest of it, who suddenly, quote, I think the title was "evolved," when their son came out and said, "Listen, I'm gay," and then it was real. And I don't think things are real until we are directly recognize the impact of it, as we talked about before. I think, seeing those Sunday commercials of, the poverty porn of the kid in Africa who's starving to death, and we flick past the channel because it doesn't really impact us. We don't have firsthand experience of it. But if we pick somebody up and put them in a plane and we immediately got them there, they'd come back and get everybody involved in it because there's a personal impact. And this is what I really liked about what you did, Josh. You took your values and said, how is this a practicality? Because values are not. Values are nebulous until they become practical, and they're not real until they become practical. And you did that. And that's what I really like about how you've shifted this idea of leadership and the environment together. So I'm really interested in talk to us about that clash of feeling the values, meanwhile stacking up the garbage.
Yeah. First of all, it became very personal. It was, it was me feeling this stuff. And see, everyone has different reasons that they care. And a lot of people say, well, let's talk about your grandchildren. Let's talk about this cuddly pet or cuddly animal that's going extinct.
Yeah.
Taking for granted that what I care about, you also care about. But that's not the case. If I assume that you care about what I care about, you feel like I'm telling you what to do. If it was only that it didn't register, that would be innocuous. But it puts people off because it makes you feel, if I tell you, stop using single-use plastic because you're hurting the environment. Now I sound like someone who wants something from you.
Yes.
And now you're going to put up the resistance. And you feel like I don't understand you. Why would I want to listen to someone who doesn't understand me? And if they want something from me, that means I'm happy and they're unhappy. I don't want to follow someone who's less happy than me. So
great insight.
And the flip side is that the challenge is to find out from the person what they care about, make them feel comfortable sharing it, and then start from that.
Because that for me, in our conversations, that's one of the things that I found most fascinating and is quite counterintuitive to the traditional way we think about leadership. Leadership we think about traditionally as in, I'm the leader, do as I tell you. And but it is. I mean, there's so much of what it seems to be about. And you're saying it's not about telling people what to do. It's not about even pushing legislation without popular support or even spreading facts, figures, doom, gloom. It's about finding out what matters to them, taking the time to find out what matters to them. But let's just say for a minute, you find that out. Okay. So we got a leader who's watching us and they're going, yeah, I don't know if this really relates to me. What would you say to that person to elicit that, to have a context?
So if I'm one-on-one with that person?
Yeah.
I would ask them, well, if it's about the environment, I would say, what about the environment? Actually, is the environment something that matters to you? If they say no, I'll push a little bit, because generally I've gotten many no's that later, when the person often has some self-protection, of course, oh, this is where I've been judged before, so they don't want to share.
Yeah.
So I got to communicate to them and behave in a way that's supportive and non-judgmental, so that they'll feel comfortable finally sharing it. So I've never gotten a no that didn't later turn into a yes, because we breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we live on the same land. So once they say, yes, the environment means something to me, then I say, what does the environment mean to you? And then I usually walk them through a few steps. And my TEDx talk is about this, is to make them feel comfortable sharing. So one of the things is, I point out how this is one of my favorite parts of my podcast, is to ask people, what does the environment mean to you? Because I really thought at the beginning, everyone would have the same answer that I did.
Right.
I've never heard the same answer twice. And that opens my world. It makes me learn more about the person. And also, a lot of people feel like they have to give the answer that, like, the New York Times says that they should have, or the Greenpeace says that they should have. That's nice that Greenpeace has a position and they care about it in a certain way as an organization. That doesn't, and some people think, well, mine is smaller than that. It's less important than that. It's the most important thing for you.
Of course.
What you care about is what you care about. And it usually goes back and forth a few times. I have to be careful not to talk over them. And eventually it will come out. Something will come out. And it's almost always something that is difficult to put into words. It's often an image or an emotion. So examples are things like, one guy talked about the apple orchard, which was near where he grew up and is no longer there. And someone talked about fishing with his grandfather in the Pacific Northwest and just being out in the wilderness. And different people talk about, it's what's for them. And it's an image. It's something that they have to get to. There's layers of protection. There's layers of people telling them what they're supposed to think on top of that. And when you get that, and there's often multiple ones, but once you get to at least one, then.
But what I'm loving about what you're saying here, that I really want everybody to grasp, because I think that we all do it, not necessarily with the environment. We might do it with anything, really. But we have something that matters to us, and then we apply assumptive knowledge to it. We assume that everybody sees it the same way we do. Excuse me. We assume that everybody sees it the way we do, and we don't. And you are putting that to the side, finding out what matters to them, why it matters to them.
Yeah, and making them feel comfortable with it, because there's almost nothing that people want to share more than their deepest values, if the person they say it to will support them and not judge them, not make fun of them. And most of us as kids, we've had our heart broken. We've had things happen to us that we've learned not to share these things. We've learned that if we share them, we can be manipulated. Superman is invulnerable. How did they get Superman? You find out about Lois Lane. If you know what he cares about, that makes him vulnerable. And so we protect ourselves. But it's crazy, because that's what we want to share the most. And that's one of the most important parts of being a leader. I cringed when you said, and I hope everybody cringed when you said, telling people what to do. That works in the movies.
Right.
But if you don't tell them what to do, what do you do? What I try to do is connect what they care about to the task that I want done. And then they do it for their reasons, not mine. But how do I find out what they care about? Well, I have to ask them. But if I just ask them and they don't feel comfortable answering, then they're not going to answer. So before asking, I have to behave and communicate in ways that make them feel comfortable sharing. And it's listening, it's confirming what they said, letting them correct you. It's not, if they say, my big value is X, then I don't say, oh, really? Let me tell you about my thing. Because then it's honoring them. It's putting them first. It's recognizing that their emotions, not their logic, their emotions, their feelings, are what guide them. And I'm going to add to something. One other thing that happens a lot is that people often will have their image, what motivates them. So this guy, the apple orchard is gone, and he thinks that's really sad. And he doesn't want future generations to lose out on what's left. And then he'll go into a strategy, and he'll think of what he can do. And he will often, that thought of the apple orchard will be in him, but deep down. Most of your time is spent strategizing on I should do this, they should do that, I'll do this, and then they'll do that. And if you lose track of that, if you don't consciously think of that, or rather, if I'm trying to lead that person and I don't get access to that, I'm dealing with strategy. But if I don't get to that underlying belief, I can easily do something that conflicts with that strategy. I'm sorry, with that belief.
Yeah.
And then that person may work with me, but there will be a fundamental conflict. He'll think, I don't understand him. He'll think, Josh wants something from me. Josh knows that I can do this, so that'll benefit him, but he doesn't know what I care about. So he doesn't know that whether it will benefit me or not. So Josh might be trying to get something from me. There'll always be that protection.
It's really, what you're talking about is really interesting, because you and I had some pretty cool conversations that are offline as well as part of shows. We've talked about really understanding what's the primary drivers of people and what is it that's underneath it, what's underneath it that we so rarely share. And what you're talking about here is something for me that I fundamentally believe. And it's so contradictory to how we've done leadership. But really great leaders make you feel safe. Mm-hmm. They make you feel safe. And I often use the analogy, when you fall in love, you will at some point in that courting phase of the relationship, lean into your partner and go, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I've never told anybody this. We've all done it, right? We've all done it. And it's that moment of feeling so safe to reveal something that is underneath. And as leaders, I think that is in many ways one of our greatest responsibilities, is to make our people feel safe enough to fully show up, even if what they believe is apparently contradictory. And I do say apparently contradictory. And the reason I say apparently, because like you said, does the environment matter to you? No, unless I find a way to have you feel safe enough to reveal that it does, but not in the way that I framed it. And I just love that, Josh. And I really want to sort of have everybody stop for a moment, because I think that's a profound insight that people are likely to skip over and go, yeah, this guy was talking about the environment and leadership. No. Yes, he's talking about that, but how do you get to that is this piece that you've put forward, which I think is profoundly insightful for everybody. So I just want to say thank you for that.
I have to thank you even more, because everybody, you may be the only person who's recognized that it's leadership and the environment. There's a reason I put that first, because if you don't lead effectively, everyone hears blah, blah, blah environment, and they think that it's about plastic and mercury and CO2. It's the application of effective leadership to that field. And
Absolutely.
And what's the leadership part? That's creating meaning, purpose, value, joy, discovery, personal growth. If you don't have that, maybe you'll get compliance here and there on straws, but you're going to get the opposite of compliance. You're going to get suspicion and protection on the more important things. Whereas if you get them to enjoy, no matter how small it is, if it's what they care about, they will keep at it. And it will become like playing scales. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall. Here's another big thing that really kills people. It destroys their motivation in the area of the environment, is they feel like if it's not big enough, it's not worth doing. Or if it's not what other people, if it's too small, it won't make a difference. But if you believe that, then I think you would have to believe that playing a scale would be worthless for getting you to Carnegie Hall, because what's one scale?
Right.
But the people who play Carnegie Hall probably played more scales than anyone else.
But I think that that feeling of impotence, that sense that what difference can I make, is a really great way to not take any responsibility. It's a great way to say, well, I can't make that big a difference. I mean, I was listening to a speaker recently who was saying about voting in the UK during the Brexit thing. Mm-hmm. And how young people were saying that it doesn't really matter that I vote. My vote doesn't count. And it's like, well, how many millions of single people who say that does it count? Does it matter before it counts? Every one of those, every cell in your body is a part of every cell in your body. it's a collective. It works together. And I think that understanding that it is, yes, we've got to make huge steps in certain things, but those huge steps are all made of tiny little steps. And I think that's really, I loved what you were saying right at the beginning, which is just that, like, that feeling of impotence. Oh, well, what can I do? To, well, what's one little thing I can do? Now, you're doing, you've not flown since 2016. I know that, you take these long journeys, you find a way to get there, as opposed to flying on a plane or doing all the things that you're doing around the environment, but they've all been from this one thing. Now, that kind of leads me into this other side of this, which is this insane number. Most people would say insane number, 130,000 burpees.
Oh, wait, can we go back to before? Because there's something that, it comes from this one thing, and I'm not sure what you're going to say is that one thing, but the one thing for me is going to be, I'm going to put it in my words.
Sure.
But for anyone else, it'll be particular for them if they act on what they care about. Because the one thing that comes from for me is delicious. It's all about joy. Every single step that I've taken has been, it's never been, oh, someone told me to do this, I should do it. It's always been, that looks interesting, I want to try that. And then I do it and I enjoy it. The not flying is, in my heart, it is not flying. In my heart, it is enjoying my community. It's meeting people around me. I mean, it wraps up in delicious for me because that's where it came from first. I mean, if I'd gone for no flying first and then done no food packaging, I might see avoiding packaged food not as delicious, but as community, because that's what I think of. Not flying means meeting my neighbors.
Right.
And spending time here and not feeling like this place is so horrible that I have to get away all the time. And when you do that, then you have to really enjoy where you are. And like, I can go, I mean, I took sailing lessons because I want to get off this continent.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some people grew up sailing, but I didn't. And going off on the water, I'm less than 2 miles from home. It's a whole other world. It's cheaper and certainly a lot less carbon emissions than flying. And it's as great a vacation as any vacation I've ever taken. And I found that because constraints breed creativity. And it forced me, it's not the size of the thing. There's a few things that are really core to my environment, the application of leadership to the environment. One is, it's about joy. You have to start with the joy. Next is thinking it's not the magnitude of what you do, it's developing skills, experiences, and beliefs. And once those are there, then you do it, you enjoy doing it. And another big thing is there's a huge opportunity. If you want to lead, you find me another place where billions of people are craving leadership, because who wants to feel, if I act but no one else does, then what I do doesn't matter. Anything that has anything remotely like what I do doesn't matter, we do not want that.
Right.
And so the opportunity over and over, I talk to leaders on my podcast that their leadership emerged because they did not, oh, I want to make partner at McKinsey or something like that. That's following.
Yes.
I mean, you learn some low level leadership, but this is like, whoever takes the leadership mantle today will be setting a legacy to endure, I mean, at least generations, centuries, maybe more.
And I'll come back to the burpees, but one of the things that I was going to come to later, but because you started out here, and it was certainly in the beginning, when we look at primary drivers of human beings and we look at what gets people moving, oftentimes it's a context, so I'm not going to do anything about the environment because I'm impotent in the context, right? So the context is I'm impotent. It doesn't make a difference. But one of the things that, is a really great lesson you gave right at the opening of the show here was you gave the environment a context of delicious.
Yeah.
Which is a freaking bizarre context for most people. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? But it's like, well, how can I make this? And it's gone from delicious food to delicious experiences of sailing and, and all these things. And that need for people to recognize that one of the things I would like to say to people is, in the context of the environment, what context do you want to give it? Do you want to give it the, like you said, the restriction that I'm not allowed to fly? Because that is a context you can give it.
Yeah.
Or do you want to? But that's not the one you gave it. But you know, a person might go, oh, well, yeah, I guess if I'm going to care about I'm not allowed to fly. People say, you know, we see people all the time. I'm out at dinner with a team I was working with this weekend, and somebody said, do you want dessert? And one of the guys goes, oh, no, I'm not allowed that. And I said, oh, really? Who are the food police? Please tell me. Right? And he goes, well, I'm just looking after my health. Then I said, why aren't you choosing not to have it because you're choosing your health? But instead, you hold this framework that you're not allowed. Like there's a food police who are going to come out and beat you with batons if you choose the creme brulee. You've given it the context of delicious. Help our viewers, our listeners, grasp how they could maybe, you know, in the context of what matters to them, how could they give something, or particularly the environment, particularly environmental responses, how could they give it a context that might work for them?
So the context is already there. It's because they care. If they care something about the environment, it's there. So the guy with the Pacific Northwest, the grandfather of fishing, that was Brian Brayman. He's a Philadelphia Eagle. He won the Super Bowl. So my first question to him, my beginning of the question was, what does the environment mean to you? And we went back and forth, and then he shares that. And you can listen to it to hear his exact answer.
Sure.
And then later I say, is there something that you could do to act on that value? And almost everybody, when they hear that question, they think, what am I supposed to do? But that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking what others say. What does that feeling inside connect with? And then you're acting on what you care about. And the first couple times you do it, you're just getting a feel for it. So for Brian, he's got some cars that pollute more than he would like. So he took on reducing his car pollution, but in his mind, in his heart, he's fishing with his grandfather.
Right.
So for him, my delicious is for him fishing with the grandfather.
Yep.
And
bond with his granddad. And
so the friend who spoke about the apple orchard, he happens to be, I think, Kurdistan, anyway, somewhere where he said that apples come from that region. Like that's where humans first discovered apples, and then they spread all over. And so he says that there's more apples around there than any other place. This is why I love asking these questions, because you hear these things.
Cool. Yeah.
And so for him, he took on a task of not taking taxis on Fridays. I don't know, that's how it worked out. Now
sure.
It seems very minor to me, but what he's doing is bringing back apple orchards. So I believe that if I speak to him, he'll say it's about apple orchards for him. And whoever's listening to this, I mean, listen to the podcast. Your episodes are some of the ones that I tell people to listen to the most, because you began with something small and became huge.
Thank you.
I mean, the huger, different people will say it's definitely, by my measures, bigger than most people's on the podcast.
Right.
And more enthusiastic. And the reason you took on the really big stuff at the end, and I'm leaving it as a teaser so people want to listen.
Okay, we won't tell them.
Well, you can tell it. I mean,
it's okay. No, good. I like it.
The big stuff came because the little stuff, my read was that when you experienced it, when you were like, if I use it now, I'm not going to be able to stay below my limit. And then you got a greater experience.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you act on your values. So whoever's listening, the first question is, what do you care about? And you got to go back and forth a few times until you get underneath. And then what can you do to act on that? Now, I do some management techniques after that, which is to say, let's make it a SMART goal: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound, where the specific and time bound are the real keys there. And then I apply some accountability, because accountability gets the job done. So I say to someone, can we talk about it a second time? And when they know that they're going to do it, when they know there's some accountability, then that helps people get the job done. But the job is what they created themselves. And so whoever's out there, what do you care about? What does it mean to you? Is it your pet? Is it where you walk your dog? Is it that science fiction movie that scared you because of some future thing? Was it that time you swam with the dolphins? Whatever it is, that's your thing. No one else feels like it's your personal thing. And whatever you act on with that will for you become meaningful. And the more that you act on it, the more that will expand, and that'll become a bigger and bigger part of your life. People will follow you because they want to swim downstream. It feels to you like you're swimming upstream because you're going to have to turn down coffee cups, or you're going to have to turn down straws. You're going to have to, whatever it is, you're going to have to do something that the rest of the world, they're in a system that was built not knowing that we humans could do what we're doing on the scale that we are, but science shows, as far as I can tell, that we are. You're going to exit that system, and it's hard to exit systems and start new systems, but that system is based on your values. And it happens that I think there's overlap with basically everyone who wants clean air, clean water, clean land shares those values. You're gonna have to feel like you're swimming upstream. But once you start doing that, I'm gonna mix a metaphor here a bit. The tide will turn and they will feel like they're swimming downstream. And that's, and they will want to follow you and you will feel fantastic. And you're gonna get promoted. You're gonna get job offers accidentally because you're leading people and people like to follow you.
Well, I think that, you know, you and I have talked about this before, that leadership is impact and it's leading by example. And the fact of the matter is you're always having impact. It just may not be the kind you'd want. And most people don't bother to stop and ask that question of themselves. And when you say, what do you care about? And then you ask about the action you can take in the context of that, that is saying, what is the action you're willing to take? What is the impact you're willing to have as a result of the action you're willing to take? And I love that. Quick sort of diversion back to the burpees, because I want people to get this. Right. So you've done 130,000 plus.
Yes.
Number one, why? And number two, this is you and I have talked about this and it's a great metaphor. I love it. So talk to us about not only why, but why get started and why keep going? And, you know, for somebody else who's thinking about, I want to do it.
So I didn't begin saying, I want to see how many burpees I can do.
No.
I mean, I'm going to go way to the beginning. I was a chubby kid growing up. My stepbrother he'd do little tilly twisters and I was like, stop that. And I was defenseless. And later in life, I got into sports and I certainly liked being athletic, but I liked being fit. And then as I got older, the team sports were much harder practically to do because people have kids and it's harder to do the team sports, especially living in New York. There's not a whole lot of playing fields around. So I switched to running marathons. I don't know if marathons are particularly healthy. They're certainly time consuming and it's really solo. It's lonely. So I started, I joined a gym. There's a gym at the end of my block. It's like 100 yards from my door, but if it rains, I'm not likely going to go. And it costs money. And I started doing yoga, but then it depends on my yoga instructors. I certainly all of these things I loved, but there was always something that would get me from doing it. Like I had to go by my yoga instructor's schedule. And sometimes we do it at a different studio and it was inconvenient. Then I read this article in the New York Times where they asked a bunch of fitness experts, if you could pick one exercise to be the single best exercise, what would it be? And they talked about several, and they mentioned almost in passing the burpee, which I'd never heard of. No. And so for people who don't know, a burpee is you drop down to a push-up and then jump up. And it began as it's been around for a long time.
Yep.
And then the guy said, this fitness expert said, but who would do just burpees? And I thought, well, if it's the best exercise, that means I can do, for the same level of fitness, I can do the least amount of work. And in passing, I mentioned it to a friend months later, actually. I didn't really act on it. And then, I don't know why, we just said, let's do 10 burpees a day for 30 days. And no idea, no plan we were just going to do it. There was no long-term vision here. And as I'm doing them, I thought, this is very convenient. There's no going out in the rain. There's no weights. There's no trainer. There's no very low risk of injury. And then I went from 10 to 11 to 12 to 13. And by the end of the month, I was doing we also decided we doubled it to do one set in the morning, one set in the evening. So I was probably doing 30 a day by the end of the week, end of the month. And then some things kicked in that I didn't realize, kind of passed me by when I read that first article. The no equipment, the no trainer, you can just do it anywhere. There's nothing to stop you.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to do these forever. I'm thinking can I do this on 80? And I thought, why not? This is the most for any amount of fitness, it's the least amount of work to do. And then since then, I still feel in my heart that I'm doing 10, even though I've added more and more and more. And then I've added, I do planks and crunches and I do stretches and I do some back stuff. So I've added to it. So it's a 15-minute thing in the morning, 15-minute thing in the evening. And I'll tell you what's a lot harder than burning the calories of a burpee is to decide, am I going to do it or not? It's the mental effort of, should I do it today? I'm tired. maybe I'll do more tomorrow. That's killer. It's much easier just to say, I'm going to do them and I don't ask myself, am I going to brush my teeth tonight? I brush my teeth every morning, every evening. No, that gives me freedom. The mental effort that doesn't improve my life. That actually makes my life worse, to go around in circles about, should I do it? Should I not do it? And most of the things, and it started this process of, when something is something that I consider critical to my daily life, I simply make it automatic. And now I have structure, and structure creates freedom.
Absolutely.
And so fitness, a certain level of fitness is absolute to me. And I achieved that through this. And now so many people, it feels like exercise and food are like horror shows for them. They're like terrifying. And it's glorious for me. Like the no packaged food means it's all, I'm not at zero packaged food. I throw stuff out, but I go to the farmer's market, I have my CSA, and it's so delicious. I eat to stuffed every meal. And my 6-pack shows.
Mm-hmm.
That's freedom, that's joy. Yeah. And again, this primed me for the environment stuff to work, was that I had an expectation that what other people see as like really difficult, I see as part of the structure of my life. And I think, so now if I'm going to talk to the 3-time global managing director of McKinsey, or I'm going to talk to Olympic gold medalists, or I'm going to talk to, a 4-star Marine general, do I see them as peers? I certainly don't see them as like unapproachable.
No.
I got
There's a commonality there somewhere.
I got my life together, and so I see them as peers.
Sure. Yeah. Now, part of the work you do, even at NYU, it's around entrepreneurship as well as leadership. However, you see the need for us to focus on initiative rather than just simple entrepreneurship. Talk to us a little bit about that, because it ties in exactly with what you're saying here.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of resources out there about entrepreneurship, and they almost always start with like lean. I think lean is a great methodology. If people read Lean Launchpad and Lean Startup, I'm a big fan of it, but it's very clear. Like page 1, it's certainly chapter 1. It says, this is a book about entrepreneurial management. If you have an idea and a team, we will help you build that. Well, when I talk to people who want to start a project, whether that's getting promoted and getting more responsibility at work, or getting a hobby, like a podcast or something like that, the number one reason they say why they haven't started it, if they haven't, is they don't have an idea. If I talk to people who have successfully started something and I ask them, is what you're doing now the original idea? Never. That tells me it's not the idea. It's something internal to the person.
Yes. And
so it took me years to develop how to get people to see it's themselves, I want to give them a process to develop the skills to create ideas and act on them, so that it's the overlap of their passion with something that people want, they'll reward you for if you do them. And it's really missing. There's a whole set of processes that you can, or steps that you can take, exercises that you can do that will reveal a lot of what very successful people know from experience. Mm-hmm. But people who don't start, exactly what successful people use to motivate them, unsuccessful people use to stop them. And
right.
The difference in that perspective, as far as I know, I can tell it to you till I'm blue in the face, but it won't register. But if you experience it, that will change if you believe this will not work, and then I walk you through a way to make it work, then that will make that old belief go away. Mm-hmm. So I have all these students I'm an adjunct here at NYU, and that means I can't really advertise my course. So a lot of students take my course and they think this is a regular, traditional read and write papers, case study course. And then on the first day of class, I say, you guys are going to start a project, and it's going to be a project with people in the world that you care about, on a project that you care about. Again, it's always coming back to what you care about.
Absolutely.
And I've had students who say, I almost dropped your class that first day. And one of my students who came in, had no idea what he was going to do, just got back from Y Combinator in California. He's been written up in the Wall Street Journal, in the Washington Post, funded by Zuckerberg, by Eric Schmidt from Google. I got this one, I think she was a freshman or a sophomore. At 19 years old, she spoke at Harvard about her project. Another woman, there was this thing that she worked on, which was, it was a medical device thing. And she got in touch with the medical device company. She was leading or helping lead a team of medical engineers. She was like 19, 20 years old.
Amazing.
She took initiative to start a project. And it's time after time, people can do that. Anyone can, what someone else has done, you can do too. It's the challenge that's got to get you started. So
how can we learn to lead and practice operating out of initiative? Because as you said, people feel like they don't have the right idea yet. You know, how can we actually learn to lead and practice initiative?
Can I say buy my book? I mean,
sure.
The reason I wrote the book, and the book is based on the course. Mm-hmm. The course was designed because there were too many people who believed that they couldn't do what plenty of other people did.
Right.
And I created a set of exercises that start you from wherever you are. And some people come in with the course with a project that they've already started, but oftentimes they started it not for themselves. Like they started something and it started making money, or people said, hey, you should really do that. But it still might not really connect with them inside. So even if you have a project, it's still useful to start from the beginning. And so the first exercises are how to identify things that you care about, and then also missing things in the world that people would reward you for. And then I walk people through a set of exercises. For me to go into them, I would only be able to go into a few of them in a podcast.
Of course.
But I think of it like scale. Again, that's my model, is when you tell someone how to play a scale on a piano, you say, like, put this finger on that key, this finger on that key, this finger on that key. And what could be further from expressing your emotions through your music? It's very mechanical. Mm-hmm. And yet magically, almost like magic, once you play the scales enough and you don't have to think about your muscles, then eventually your voice will emerge. And so I tell you, speak to these people in this way and say these things. And if they do this, you have to do that. And if they do that, you have to do this. Because there's certain patterns that happen all the time. You get a lot of judgment from people. Judgment isn't helpful. So how do you steer them from judgment to support, to advice, and things like that? And next thing you know, here's a big thing that I say, is that most people, when they start, they don't know what they want to do. They think either I have no ideas or I have too many ideas. Both, those are two sides of the same coin.
Yep, exactly.
And when you develop these things, there's passing fancies that you think, well, blockchain, that sounds really cool. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe I should build an app because lots of people are doing that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Some of those may turn out to be your greatest passion in life, but most likely it will be a passing fancy. A lot of people are scared to work on something because what if I work on this and then I find out that's not what I really love? I'm going to wake up in bed with someone that I'm married to. I'm going to have 2 kids and a mortgage, and for something that what I didn't want to do. But don't do that in life with your spouse. What I did is you can just let that one go and start a new one. Right. And
but again, we get so attached, don't we? I mean, we're, like you just said, we're afraid that if we do something, I mean, human beings, we want to bond, and oftentimes we bond with our own daft ideas. We bond with them, and then we're like, oh, I can't let it go. Well, it's crap. Let it go. It didn't work anymore. All right. And of course, there's grief with anything you've invested into. But the only way to evolve as a human being is to be willing to let something go, to let something die, so that something else can be born.
Yeah, I would say, one of my big principles in the book is the idea of a lifetime comes once a month. Now, it takes longer than a month to make it realistic. Execution takes a long time, but if it doesn't work out, the next one's about a month away. And it's even faster once you get the skills. Another thing is, if you say you have A, B, and C, and you're not sure what to do, and you work on A, if it becomes a great passion, great, you won. Congratulations, your first one worked. If it doesn't work, nothing will, say it was really secretly B, but you didn't know that, nothing will get you to B faster than doing A and exhausting A. A will, at some point, it'll become better and better and better, and suddenly it will fall, but B will start rising. Mm-hmm. Look back at A, not with regret, not at having wasted your time, but with gratitude at having gotten you to B. And B may take you to the finish line, Or maybe B will lead to C, in which case you will look back at A and B with gratitude.
Yeah.
And this took me a long time to learn as a professor, as a teacher. I kept wanting to help them get the right one first, but that's not it. It's to develop the skills, to the sensitivity to find out what's inside. And that comes from working on whatever you work on first.
Yeah, and it's that willingness to be curious. Now, you know, we're talking here about you being adjunct professor at NYU, but, you know, you've got 5 Ivy League degrees. Really? Come on, isn't that just fucking showing off?
Well, 3 of them with a PhD. And I love nature. I mean, it's my, you know, not many people ask me, what do you care about the environment? But if they did, they'd hear that it's the beauty. There's an aesthetic beauty to me that I can find it if I really work hard in a trash heap, but there's something qualitatively different for me into a sunset or to, you know, a puppy playing, you know, and physics to me is about getting that at a deeper and deeper and deeper level. And the beauty that I could, other people see equations, but, you know, they do the studies with fMRIs that when a mathematician looks at a beautiful equation, it's the same part of the brain that lights up as if, you know,
creativity. Yeah.
And I just love that. So the master's, the MPhil, and the PhD were that. Then I started a company and I lost control of it and realized my leadership was like through the floor of like, it's horrible. I mean, it was fine when things were going well, but when things went badly, that's when you need leadership. You can't just use the tools of management when they don't know if the paycheck's going to come next week.
Exactly.
And so I went back for the MBA. So that taught me I could learn leadership, but it was again, the traditional, then I had to go like, let's make this active learning because that works.
Right. I think that I truly believe that real leadership requires courage. What's the most difficult leadership decision you've had to make?
I mean, now it's hard for me not to think of letting go of people when times are really tough. There are a few times that I've cried as an adult, and that was one of them. And it was really, I mean, you know, it's the right decision. You know, I mean, if I kept them on, they'd get a little bit more pay, but then the company would completely fold. And, you know, it worked out that we had relationships that we would let them stay in and look for the next jobs. But that was really brutal. You know, I'm going to, you know, when I was, that company later on, it didn't fall apart. We grew again. And I spent a year in Shanghai helping our licensee there develop the next generation of technology because the factory's there and the manufacturing is there and so on there. So I'm working on that business and I'm trying to like that business is going well, but not great, but maybe it could really be great. And maybe I could help make it great. This is post-business school. And I'm also working on this leadership stuff. And I'm like there and I'm coaching and I'm doing workshops there with people, with the alumni community and stuff. And I got this decision. I'm doing great in both of these things. I could really make something happen. And I'm waiting for something to happen to show me which is the one to go with. That's a mistake to wait for it to come from the outside. You know, it's a lot of people say, you know, it's an overnight success after 10 years or, you know, chance favors the prepared mind. Chance favors action. And at some point I had to say, pick one and go with it. And you have to say no to the other thing. And it was a very difficult decision that took me the better part of a year to decide. I went with the leadership side, but the big lesson is, I mean, that's weak. I didn't believe in myself. That's the challenge. Like and the big thing is I should have made that decision earlier. And everyone who makes that decision always says, I should have made that decision earlier. Yeah,
that's so true.
And it's just so hard to say no to something that I spent more than 10 years building. I wish I'd said no earlier.
Yeah, I talked about this yesterday. I was delivering a training to a leadership team, and I said, the most difficult thing in the world is to give up your investment. The first rule of investment is you cannot lose your investment. But if your investment is in a shitty idea, you need to give it up, even if it looks like a spectacular idea. But if it's just not going to work, even though you really want it to work, You know, it's like you bought into the scheme and you wanted it to pay out, but it doesn't. And you keep putting money in hoping it's going to, but it's not going to. And it's very difficult for us as human beings to lay our ego to the side and say, you know what, I need to let that go. I need to move on. And sometimes that investment is in another human being. It's a relationship. It's, you know, sometimes it's a family member. Sometimes it's not about abandoning, but it's about no longer investing in. And oftentimes it's simply the idea, as you said, you know, you go to school, you get 10, I mean, you've know this, you've done this, and you and I have talked about it. I've worked with people who, you know, who've gotten a PhD, who've put 10 years into their education, into investing into this future of themselves, and then gone, yeah, this is really not for me. Yeah. and sometimes it takes you 10 years to get to that. But once you get to that, what opens is magnificent. But what everybody fears is 1 second before that, everybody fears, oh my God, my life is over. 1 second before, if I let go of this, my life is over. And it's like, you let go, right? There's this wonderful story told to me by one of my great teachers, Bishop William Todd. And he says, a man falls off a cliff, and as he's tumbling down, a branch is sticking out, and he grabs the branch. And he's hanging there in the middle of, like, halfway up the cliff, halfway down the cliff. And he's hanging there as he's hanging, swinging in the wind. And he goes, God, you got to help me, please. You know, I've been a good man, and I will be an even better man. If you just tell me what to do, I will do it. And then he hears a voice that says, let go. And he says, is there another God? Like, if we don't like the answer, we're going to stay with what we want. And, you know, and it's a powerful lesson, Josh. Thank you for sharing that. As we come to the end of the show, I want to ask you, because it's always so important, and I know it's vital to you, particularly in the context of where we even started out. I want you to share with our audience something that's really a piece of practical guidance in the context of leadership and the environment. What's something that you would say, consider going to do this within the next 24, 48 hours that they can actually put into action?
Listen to the podcast, especially your episode.
Thank you.
Go through the cycle that I go through with all the guests, which is, and answer for when you listen, you can listen to lots of different people giving lots of different answers, but answer for yourself. What does the environment mean to me? And go back and forth. It might help. It'll help if you get someone else to ask you and just ask simple confirmation clarification questions until you say, yes, that's it. That's it. Or maybe even what you said, I've never told anyone this before, but I got to tell you this. And then what can you do to act on that and do it for your values? Take for granted that what you care about is consistent with everyone else's. They have a different reason for wanting clean air, clean water, clean land, but it's consistent. And then find a way to act on it, and have faith in yourself that what you act on, everybody will be glad that you did, especially yourself.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Listen, as we come to the end of the show, I would love for you to share, because I know you've got a TEDx talk, you've got your podcast, which is an award-winning podcast. You have your fabulous book. You know, as I said, you're also teaching at NYU. You speak at other events. Tell us how we can tap into finding more out about Josh Spodek and about all the wonderful resources that you have.
It's all at joshuaspodek.com. So joshuaspodek.com, and then you can click on the podcast. You can find out about the books. Certainly, the best that you can get is to do the exercises in the books and on the podcast, because there's nothing that compares with you acting on things. And it's all designed to bring out passions, to bring out effectiveness, to bring out leadership. If you do the exercises in the books, nothing can compare with that.
Absolutely. Hey, Joshua, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. Thank you so much for all that you share. I love your passion, I love your commitment, and I love your action and the willingness to give that action a context that is unusual. As you know, I'm a big fan of people who think differently, and you think differently about leadership, and you think differently about the environment, and I find that inspiring, and I'm certain that our viewers and our listeners will too. Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you.
And for you, dear listener, if you want to hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes, go find us on Facebook. Go search out Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast, and you can chat there. If you want to find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, you go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. Be aware that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies often face exactly the same challenge in that spending a fortune training and developing their top talent only have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent, only have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. And also remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just matrix like the movie .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership and Matrix self-assessment tool, where you'll be able to tap into the 5 areas of leadership that will show you where your true strengths are. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what it is that really matters about the environment to you and how you can lead in the context of the environment. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.